Donald Trump has completed one of the most remarkable comebacks in political history after securing victory in the US presidential election. He becomes the oldest man to be elected and only the second person to serve 2 non-consecutive terms in the White House. In the past few hours, results from the swing state of Wisconsin took him past the 270 electoral college votes required to defeat his opponent, Kamala Harris. He also has a clear lead in the popular vote. Earlier, addressing jubilant supporters in Florida, President-elect Trump said Americans had given him an unprecedented mandate, and he promised a new golden age for the country. Well, alongside the presidential race, Americans have also been voting in congressional elections. Mr. Trump's future control of the levers of government appear to have received a major boost, with the Republicans projected to win control of the Senate. In the House of Representatives, Republicans are also leading, though several races are still undecided. If the Republicans do end up controlling the House, Senate, and the White House, it'll grant Mr. Trump broad powers to pass laws and enact his America First agenda.
I want to also thank my beautiful wife, Melania, First Lady. Who has the #1 best-selling book in the country. Can you believe that? I want to be the first to congratulate our great, now I can say, Vice President-elect of the United States, J.D. Vance.
Jubilant Donald Trump there. Well, for more on the US election results, I'm joined now on the line from Philadelphia in Pennsylvania by Arise international correspondent Adefemi Akinsoya. Great to see you, Adefemi. So across the United States where you are, it is the morning after the night before. What an extraordinary 24 hours it has been. I mean, you and I spoke 24 hours ago. We were both expecting a nail-bitingly tight race in that US election, but as it happened, it was a much more decisive win for Donald Trump. Give us a sense of the mood across America today as the country takes in the enormity of what has happened.
Thank you so much, Charles. As you rightfully said, we spent a lot of time in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and we've actually now made it to Washington, D.C. We stood in front of the White House, which, of course, come January 2025, after inauguration, will be President Trump-elect's new home once again. The mood here in Washington, D.C. is understandably somber. As you know, Kamala Harris did take this state, did take the electoral college votes associated with it. But as we know, when we look at the electoral college and the popular vote, Kamala Harris did not do enough. Donald Trump beat her resoundingly. And I do think, as you rightfully said, Charles, when we spoke just yesterday in Philadelphia, it did seem as though if you look at the pulse and the excitement and the anxiety on the streets from the people we were speaking to, it did seem as though when we got to this point, it would be far closer than what the actual reality is. And this is really the beauty of elections, especially elections that in the run-up, you can't call it either way. When it comes down to it, all that matters is who people vote for when they go in and put a star across a tick next to a candidate's name. And so with what we're hearing now, what we're seeing now, Donald Trump has now become the second person to secure a non-consecutive term, but a second term nevertheless. He is now 2-term Trump. And it will be interesting to see what this new presidency will look like. It's going to begin at a time where there's a lot of hope and anticipation for him to address the concerns of the American people, especially along the lines of the economy and people's day-to-day lives. Immigration too is definitely another tenet of his policies, of his ideas for a second term that helped push him over the mark. It was a resounding victory, and I do think that when you speak to the people here in Washington, D.C., across this Northeast, especially because a lot of these states did stay blue for Kamala Harris, there's definitely a lot of disappointment because it seems as though the machine behind Kamala Harris was ballooning and ballooning and ballooning, And with the coming of the election results, it's definitely a deflation. That being said, you can imagine that many Trump supporters across the Northeast, many men that we spoke to in Philadelphia, for example, confidently saying that not only are they voting for Trump, they're also confident that he was going to win he has done. So again, it will be very interesting internationally to see what this new Trump presidency will look like. It's a long time coming, isn't it, Charles? A few months ago, when Joe Biden was still in the race, it was about clearly understanding that Donald Trump is going to beat Joe Biden. Joe Biden is too old, not able to take grasp of this country, of this presidency, and isn't the right person for this election campaign. In came Kamala Harris, and though there was a lot of money in her campaign, a lot of support, celebrity endorsements, a lot of popular support, it seems on social media, especially when you break down different demographic groups, clearly it didn't translate to what we're seeing at the bottom line. Donald Trump has become two-term Trump at last for him.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. And you made a good point there, Femi, when you talked about the fact that he's now got to take those promises forward, fixing the economy, dealing with immigration. And it helps that the Republican Party has also won the Senate, and they're hoping to gain control of the House of Representatives as well. So along with the White House, I mean, it could be a clean sweep for the Republicans, couldn't it?
Absolutely, Charles. And if that is going to eventually materialize, Donald Trump will be one of the most powerful presidents. And so to some extent, depending on who you speak to, that's either quite a qualifying and a statement of stability, of complete trust in the Republican Party's leadership across these different tenets of American political power. To some, though, it could be quite scary that Donald Trump is returning to power as president while having a Senate that is fully Republican and a House too. This clean sweep, if it does materialize, and it does seem as though that may well be the case, it's definitely going to be once again a historic moment, and one that solidifies a complete turning away from the Democrats, from Joe Biden and his own legacy. That being said, there is, as I said, a lot of disappointment on the streets, but it could just be where we are geographically. If we go into certain states, if we go into Georgia, if we go to Florida and other areas, it would be interesting to hear what those people are feeling like, what type of anticipation they have for the future, and what they think of how powerful this new Trump presidency will be. Because, as you rightfully said, Charles, if this clean sweep does happen, not that it's unprecedented, but it is hugely, hugely significant for a new president.
Absolutely. And as you said, you know, half the country will be absolutely delighted with this result. The other half will be terrified in many ways. I mean, but of course, you came to Washington from Pennsylvania, and that was the big prize of the night, wasn't it, in terms of Electoral College votes? I mean, was there ever a sense that the Democrats were going to lose Pennsylvania? Did you get that sense while you were there?
Not early on in the day. At the very beginning of the day, especially in the morning time, after people first started casting their votes, were out on the street, there was a lot of anticipation, of excitement. The lion's share of people we spoke to said that they were voting for Kamala Harris and that they were confident she would win. There was one person, though, that I spoke to who said that she's voting for Kamala Harris, but she doesn't know if she's going to win, and she's hoping so, hoping so. Those were the very first signs of what actually ended up materializing. But because we were in a metropolitan city like Philadelphia, it did seem as though many people there were confident that Kamala Harris was who they were going to vote for, was who those precincts therein were going to go after. And we did see that happen. But clearly, when you look at Pennsylvania, because of its significance, it coming with 19 electoral college votes, you forget that outside of these key cities like Philadelphia, Scranton, Pittsburgh, which all stayed blue, for example, the rest of Pennsylvania, rural Pennsylvania, and it's just such a huge state, was completely red. So again, because of the representation of the people who you'll find in more condensed city areas, it can distort anticipation. If you only speak to people in Philadelphia, in Scranton, in Pittsburgh, you couldn't be faulted for thinking perhaps Kamala Harris can take Pennsylvania, but she didn't. She lost it quite resoundingly. And we can see that clearly when you move out of more illustrious cities, more metropolitan cities, and into more rural areas, you'll find more conservative appetite, more people who are understanding first and foremost what Kamala Harris has achieved alongside Joe Biden for the past 4 years, but also haven't forgotten what a Trump presidency would look like. And given the choice, as we see from those results, it does seem as though many Americans says, do you know what? I think I'm interested in seeing what a second Trump term will look like. One of the gentlemen we spoke to in Pennsylvania, actually, a man in what seemed to be his late 40s, early 50s, black, African-American, he said that he was voting for Trump and he was confident that he was going to win. He said that he voted for Trump against Biden in the previous election, and then also when Trump went up against Hillary Clinton. And he says that he's doing so from an informed place. And I think that's also interesting, especially when Donald Trump went up against Hillary Clinton. At that point, it did seem as though the rhetoric was people who support Donald Trump were people who lacked intelligence, who were not informed. And that clearly isn't the case over the course of the years. People are understanding that, for example, their pensions, their contributions to that have changed in a negative way under these 4 years of a Democratic presidency. And they say that they're very much interested in seeing what life will look like with Trump at the helm. So again, despite the disappointment that is palpable here in Washington, D.C., there is also a lot of anticipation and excitement for a person who says that they're going to put America first, put Americans first, and then internationally speaking too. Let's not forget that Donald Trump said that even as president-elect, he would be able to end the war in Ukraine. We'll have to sit back and see. Vladimir Putin says that he has not called Donald Trump to congratulate him. There is a lot of international issues. NATO too did seem as though they have positioned themselves to prepare for him too. When he was still at the helm, he did speak quite disparagingly of NATO, said that other NATO countries hadn't been pulling their weight. So again, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. In the Middle East too, is he going to be able to use his relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu and countries like Saudi Arabia to broker any type of ceasefire? Will that happen under his watch? And when we look at the African continent too, what can be said of his presidency? What can African countries expect from him? Let us not forget too that the last time Trump was in power, he referred to Nigeria and other countries in the global south as S-hole countries. That being said, as you know, Charles, there are still many people in Nigeria who are conservative, who are happy with this Trump presidency. So let's see what it's actually going to do. He has spoken a big game in the run-up to this election. He's spoken a good and a huge game for years. So let's see what's going to happen.
Femi, thank you very much indeed. And Femi Kinsoya is Arise international correspondent. He was talking to me on the line there from Washington, D.C.